Claire, I am beyond delighted to have you on Social Impact Power Chats. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I love that you do these. I learned so much from them and I'm just so excited to get to chat with you today.
Phenomenal. So, as you know, we have guests that come in all social impact shapes and sizes. I would say, like, you are solidly doing impact work and maybe not in like a usual suspect way. So, if you can tell us how you define social impact vis-a-vis your career, would love to start there.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely come in a weird shape and size in social impact. So I will try to kind of give you the story. So, I work in education. I do a lot in education across the landscape. I've always been interested in education. Starting from when I was in high school and college, I was volunteering in schools, a whole range of different kinds of educational institutions. And I was a classroom teacher here in Los Angeles. And then on the professional side, I continued on and actually fell into working in online learning before that was a thing. And ended up working within Stanford University and helping to run Stanford's online high school. And my first job there was actually as director of student life, which people thought was actually a joke. Like, how can you have student life in an online school? But it was actually about building community intentionally. And so that's been really the through line for me, is sort of how do you create and build communities of learning that have an impact on young people. So spent a number of years at Stanford, got to oversee an incubator that was doing a lot of really cutting edge work at the forefront of online learning, but also beyond just the school we were running, looking at how you could take campuses all over the country and tie them together. How could you bring online learning options to places like Indigenous communities and a whole range of other communities. So from that, we developed a national online learning consortium called the Malone Schools Online Network, and I became their first executive director. So we sort of took it out of Stanford and we were connecting schools all across the country to provide high level electives that kids might not have available to them locally. Then the pandemic hit, and I had been in this kind of like shadowy corner of education, and suddenly there was room in a sense to make kind of bigger impact. And so my team and I just kind of spun up some consulting work in that. We ended up reaching, I don't know, like 1,000 teachers or something that summer in live, real time professional development, really helping teachers understand the shift to online and really, again, with that focus on community, really emphasizing that you can have connections with young people online. There's incredible opportunity. Lots to say about the pandemic and online learning. It was obviously a hard time, for our country and the world, and set kids behind in a lot of ways. But there were some silver linings there. I think people learned a lot about the ways that ed tech can be positive and powerful. So, and then, I had been doing a bunch of consulting on the side, and I decided to kind of bring that front and center. I had done a lot of strategy work through board service, which I can certainly talk about. And so now that's what I'm doing. I have clients across a range of schools, nonprofits, and tech, where I help strategy, do strategic planning, but also tech and innovation work. So I help people think about what AI can do in education, how to use online learning today in positive ways. And I've had clients that have ranged from Carlos Niños, which is a amazing nonprofit here in LA that operates charter schools, early ed centers, and really does integrated services for families facing barriers to success. That's been kind of one client of mine, amazing organization. And then I've also helped some tech companies think about how they can build tools purposefully while keeping really at the center, like what's best for kids. So
Amazing. So you have like the coolest, widest span career. I'm going to ask you two specific questions, and then we'll do dealer's choice, and you can sort of take the third as your prerogative. But the main goal of this conversation is, if we were sitting across from somebody who was in an impact role, pieces of advice that we would give them if we were kind of having a live chat. So my first question for you, and I think I met you on the tail end of the pandemic, and it really did blow my mind that you were so prescient in like this online learning world, or lucky, or whatever it is that you had so much expertise in. So I do think there are people who live in an impact microcosm that end up finding themselves in kind of the spotlight because the world changes so quickly. And so my first question for you is, what advice would you give to somebody who yesterday their work may have been fairly niche, and then today, because of the course of events of the world, their work is like in headlines and they need to have a bigger microphone than they've ever had, they need to scale? Like, what are some tips and, things, words of advice that you would give to people who find themselves in that kind of like meteoric moment?
Mhm. I mean, I kind of think you should always be ready for a meteoric moment. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to say. Like, it's not to say that I was really thinking that way, but I think it's helpful to be always think about how you explain the work you do and why it matters, even to yourself. Why am I in this job today? Why have I chosen to spend my precious time on this issue? You've got to be able to say that to yourself. Having really good family and friends around and mentors that you're constantly in dialogue with, answering that question is helpful because then you're ready when you get bigger and bigger microphones. You know the reason, you know the justification, you know how it connects to your values. I know that sounds cheesy, but I think it's really important to be able to articulate that at all times, especially in impact roles. Like, what's the story? What's the theory of change? Why have I decided to work on this? So that's maybe one piece of advice, is to always have that narrative in your head, because you should have it for yourself. And then bigger and bigger microphones, you know how to get out there and say it.
I love that. And if you're ready for the meteoric moment, you're ready for today, regardless of what it has to throw at you. So
That's
I
right.
think that's perfect. So question number two, in terms of this advice piece, you've served in so many roles as a direct service provider, as somebody who is in more of a leadership function, as a board member who had a lay presence for that organization. Thinking as kind of the representative of that community, we have a lot of folks who are representing corporations, foundations, donors. What would you want people who are in that sort of donor role, that partnership role, to know and to think about in terms of how to be successful within the organization from your perspective, like from those sort of various hats?
So, as you know well, organizations have the concept of sort of restricted and unrestricted funding. And I think that a lot of ways, for me, that's a metaphor for general purpose funds that the leaders of an organization can direct at their discretion. And then restricted, something that sometimes someone specifically outside wants to do. And both are wonderful. And I'm not the expert in this, you are. But I think that the first question to ask is, what are you doing with the support, with the resources you have right now? What would you, as the CEO, executive director, do with more? And let them tell you, and let them, tell you where the needs are, tell you where the vision is. Most people who end up in CEO or executive director roles have a vision, and they were put there for a reason. Let them tell you what their vision is before going in and saying, I have a pet project. Can it find a home here? Like, sometimes there's a mix between those two, but, usually there is somebody. It may not always be the number one, sometimes the number two, but they have an idea or they have a vision. And usually I have found that projects can be the most successful when they start with that internal vision and not always from an outside perspective. But again, sometimes there's a beautiful way that those come together. And then I guess just, again, it sounds a little cheesy. In education, I just need to know, in whatever hat, whatever seat I'm in or whatever hat I'm wearing, I need to know that it is really good for kids. It's kind of simple. It has to be good for kids. So sometimes that becomes into tension with a desire for growth or scale or profit, or something comes up against real wellness for young people. Especially today, we have a real mental health crisis among kids. Technology is a real double-edged sword. Talk and write about this. There's incredible potential in technology, including AI, for learning, and there's incredible risk. So being super laser focused on what is best for kids at all times.
The last question, I said dealer's choice, but I'm taking it back because I have a third one that I want to ask. You can't disaggregate, Claire, the professional and Claire the human and everything that you do in the world. I'm wondering how you think about yourself as a vehicle for impact and how you think about your time, because I think it will resonate with so many of us who are, really out there living our values in every corner of our life.
Yeah. I have to say though, like when I have ended a day and I have felt like I've tried to have social impact in almost every hour of the day, I feel really good. So I guess I think about it just personally, my profession is in education. There's a lot of social impact there. I do a lot of volunteer work, a lot of board work in the space. And then I'm also sort of unabashedly politically involved, and that's very important to me. And obviously there are boundaries there, and I'm very careful about that. But I am trying to step back and think about like the portfolio approach. I know this is something you've really specialized in. I think you've actually really taught this to me, Emily, that you can be having impact by pressing a lot of really different levers with your professional time, your personal time, and across like for-profit, nonprofit, politics. It's all there, and it's to me it's all about like what are the values, and then what's the story I'm telling, or in that has hopefully an ending that is a happy ending, like for the whole world. I'm not saying I'm doing that, but like I want to be part of a narrative that is creating positive change in the way that I would want to see it worldwide, and that might be through a lot of different uses of my time.
I love that. And I mean, cognitive dissonance doesn't feel good. Like when things don't make sense at the end of the day, when you sit down and you're like, this thing I did over here is actually in conflict with this thing that I did over here. Like that's weird for humans. So I totally co-sign. And I think people really do like feel uplifted when they can weave together their whole lives in a way that makes sense. It's such a gift to give yourself and the world. I can't believe it. Power chats are quick. We're already at our last question, which is something we always finish with forward looking. You spend a lot of time thinking about the future in your work, and I know in life as well. So just what's one thing you're looking down the pike at, in terms of trends or things that are, interesting that you think people should have on their radar?
I mean, it's a little cliche, but I will point to AI. I mean, it's everywhere. It's impacting our lives, our work, all of that, how we raise our kids, etc. I would say that I look at AI as the evolution of a lot of amazing technology. And like a lot of prior technology, it's going to require thoughtful implementation, guardrails, regulation, really serious conversations around ethics, and there's amazing benefit there. And so I'm thinking about how can AI be used to make humans able to be the most human we can? How can AI help teachers get their Sundays back is the term I use, so that they can show up in the classroom and be really present with young people, asking them about their thoughts, feelings, hopes, dreams, having conversations with people, helping people deepen conversations across difference. Like that's the end result. And how can we use something like AI to help us get there? So anyway, that's one of the things I'm thinking about right now.
That is beautiful. And I appreciate that you're helping to make that true, because I think everybody should get their Sundays back. And I love the idea of technology helping us to all be more human. So we'll be looking out for more. Thank you again for power chatting, and really excited to see all of the work that you continue to do.
Thanks, Emily.